Okay, this is not going to be a Berserk channel, but there's simply so much to talk about here. So, let's talk about Griffith, the eclipse, his morals, and the violation of Casca. And since we're gathered here today, let's talk about the forgotten chapter 83 as well. That one chapter that was cut from the manga, where Griffith has some kind of encounter with God. Even though Griffith's deeds can't be justified, they can be understood, at least within the broader context of the world in which Berserk is set. We have to admit that the ideals Griffith embodies are not wrong, especially when you look at the horrors and terrors within this world. It's a grim world full of chaos and brutality. And Griffith wants to become a nobleman, to be able to create a world where there is order instead of chaos. He's not born with power or privilege. Only through intelligence and force of will is he able to ascend. With his strategic mind, he learns the rules as if it was a game of chess. Through his charisma, he is able to convince people of his vision of the world. When he talks about the kingdom he wants to create, everyone without birthright or power listens. And you could even go as far as calling his goals noble. Well, at least according to the idea he offers his fellowship. And this idea is exactly what sets him apart from the typical warlords and mercenaries within the Berserk cosmos. He dreams of a utopia, a place where people can live in peace. So this is not just a personal goal and the dream of leadership, but also a guiding star for everyone that follows him. His loyal followers, called the Band of the Hawk, are not following him out of fear, but because of the hope that one day they will be able to live a better life. They see in Griffith a leader that can rise in this world. Someone that indeed could create a kingdom of peace, even though it takes a lot of battles along the way. He simply embodies a dream that no one dares to dream. A life that is not based on mere survival. So we could say that the realization of his dream could create a greater good. But to achieve this kingdom, Griffith must make many sacrifices along the way. Before we dive deeper, I'd like to recommend a great place to buy Berserk and other comics and manga. Walt's comic shop is like the safe haven for every comic and manga fan in Europe. Not only do they have the deluxe editions of Berserk there, but almost any other manga and comic you can imagine. And with the code COSMICCOMICCORNER you'll get free shipping for your first order above 40 euros. Now let's go back into the world of Berserk. And so we find ourselves in the slaughterhouse that is the eclipse. Griffith decides to sacrifice everyone that fought by his side. He decides to ascend to godhood and leave humanity behind. His ambition means more to him than friendship and loyalty. But to understand Griffith, we must examine the events that lead up to this moment. Because by the time the eclipse occurs, not only his dream but also his body has been shattered. Through the torture he received, his mind and body are completely broken. Where once was confidence, there is now despair and helplessness. His vision and dream were eradicated, so his existence becomes rather meaningless for him. Just at the brink of suicide, he's offered a way out of this, which is not death, well, at least not his own. So he let go of his humanity and sacrificed the Band of the Hawk. The behelit he once was given suggests that this moment was predestined to happen. One could say it was fate, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. So after the behelit grants him to call upon the God Hand, he's basically given a second chance to fulfill his dream. And this raises philosophical questions, because if Griffith would let go of his dream, everyone that died for him died in vain. He still could create his kingdom if he just sacrificed some more. The member of the God Hand, Ubik, explains to Griffith that he already stands on a pile of bodies, so his decision is more or less already set in stone. So Griffith finally accepts his destiny and is reborn as the fifth member of the God Hand called Femto. And let's be honest here, the members of the Band of the Hawk are not entirely innocent. He never deceives them about his ultimate goal. He just not wants them to see how far he would go. But his vision is always transparent. And at one point of the story, he even tells Guts that he is the one who decides where Guts will die. Here we can already witness his narcissistic and possessive personality. But Guts finally decides to leave the Band of the Hawk and search for his own path. That happens after hearing that a friend to Griffith means an equal and not someone that follows. The rest of the Band of the Hawk sees in Griffith someone that they almost worship. They want to be led. Meanwhile, Guts wants to find his own purpose in life. The eclipse shows to us what it means to sacrifice something for ambition, and that betrayal can occur when we blindly follow someone. And to underline this, we can just look at human history, because many of the greatest leaders have sacrificed whole armies in the name of progress. From Julius Caesar to Napoleon, from Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, the pursuit of a great vision often entails the destruction of those who stand in the way. So, Griffith's decisions are not uniquely evil. They can be seen as part of a broader pattern of human history. His willingness to sacrifice the Band of the Hawk for the sake of his own kingdom mirrors the way in which real-world leaders have justified their actions, always in the name of a greater good. So sometimes things like that can be seen as a necessary evil, an achievement for all of humanity which takes its toll. So once again, Griffith wants to create a safe kingdom for humankind. He lets go of his humanity and ascends to godhood. And everything of that happens in the cloak of fate. His rebirth as Femto grants him great powers. Horrific as they are, the sacrifices happening during the eclipse pave the way for a new era of prosperity. So, can we condemn someone who sends people to their death for a greater good?
Yes, we can.
This is most definitely a moral dilemma, one that Berserk masterfully presents. But despite his godhood, Griffith remains a human-like character, which makes him kind of relatable. His pride, his ambition, and his inability to accept failure. All that makes him a man driven by an all-consuming vision. But we cannot simply ignore the role of his ego, because Griffith's deeds are definitely not altruistic, and his rebirth serves himself the most. Though it would be too easy to leave it like that. So let's go back to the eclipse one more time. The violation of Casca is one of the most pivotal points of the story, and it's also one to be discussed. Many simply regard this as an act of vengeance. He shows his domination over Guts and Casca, and even though the world of Berserk is a grim one, this event definitely stands out. And it's actually kinda hard to explain why Griffith did what he did. On the surface, it just seems like an act of malice and rage, to demonstrate that he can take whatever he wants. But if you look how the story progresses, it seems that there was actually more to this. But that's all just theories right now, and I don't wanna pretend like I know everything. As we know now, there's definitely a connection between Griffith and the Moonlight Boy. So once again, fate could come around the corner with an explanation. But despite all that, the violation of Casca feels like a personal act of vengeance. Especially when you look at what happens right before the eclipse, where we witness Griffith forcing himself onto Casca, or at least he tries to. When given a body again, he's reasserting control, and there's definitely some spite and jealousy in there as well. The first time Griffith sees Guts again after he left the Band of the Hawk, he tries to strangle him, so Griffith carries with him unresolved bitterness towards Guts. Unable to do anything, Guts has to watch as Griffith violates Casca. Even if it was a necessary part of his godly transformation, the way in which it is depicted tells us that this cannot be just a strategic move. Casca admired him deeply and almost regarded him as a god, and it was through Guts that he slowly lost this status. So you can definitely see this as an act of dominion. He lost not only his dream and the Band of the Hawk, he also lost Guts and Casca, and so he regains his status through force. His transformation from an inspiring leader to a monster has been cemented by this act. Griffith has now abandoned all of his morals. When we look back, the first encounter Griffith and Casca ever had were when he saved her from a similar situation. Griffith simply destroyed any good deed he had ever done. He embraces his newfound godlike power. His humanity no longer resides within him. Later in the story, there are hints that the Moonlight Boy is definitely connected to Griffith and his human side. From a narcissistic standpoint, Griffith did nothing wrong. He's still doing everything to achieve his dream and fulfill his destiny. Guts was the only one who ever led him astray from his path. Through the eclipse, he destroyed any emotional bond he still had. But I guess that the Moonlight Boy will play a big role later on. I still believe that within the context of the story, the violation of Casca has a role to play. But for a broader context, let's have a look at the chapter 83, which has been cut from the books. And even though I really enjoyed this chapter, I can absolutely understand why Miura said that this chapter gave away too much too soon. I mean, this was right within the eclipse. So in chapter 83, we basically witness a conversation between Griffith and God, or the idea of evil. It describes itself as a common consciousness that transcends individuality. It is the world, the darkness, that dwells in every human heart. As it describes itself, the idea of evil. It tells Griffith that it is truly the will that defines human nature. And by will, the concept was created by humans. They created it out of the desire to explain suffering and death. It tells Griffith that it dwells deeply in his heart, and that it is indeed a part of him, just as Griffith is a part of it, and therefore part of the common consciousness. Ultimately, it tells him to be as he wills. It explains that his actions shall be proved to be suitable for humanity as a whole, and that they will bring pain or salvation to mankind. Griffith even experiences that he can change his body according to his likes. Griffith desires to have wings, and so he gets them. All of this makes the world of Berserk seem like a reflection of the human soul, especially the evil and demonic forces. So it wasn't God who created man, but man who created God. It means that free human will led to the horrors and terrors within this world, and that which we regard as fate is controlled by the common consciousness. So this God, or idea of evil, or common consciousness, is basically everything that humankind desires. And this entity controls fate, because humans subconsciously wanted to be this way. So fate controlled that Griffith would be at the eclipse. But Griffith's desires created his fate. At one of our first encounters with Griffith, he tells one of his men of the Band of the Hawk to do as he will, which is exactly the same the idea of evil tells Griffith later in the story. And even when Casca wants to join the Band of the Hawk, Griffith tells her to do as she wishes. So when the idea of evil tells him to do as he wills, and remember, the idea of evil is referred to as common consciousness, it feels almost like Griffith has a conversation with himself. But even if you read the story without this chapter, ultimately Griffith's deeds happened according to his will. Within the story, Griffith tells Guts that he cleansed himself of any human emotion, and that nothing else exists his heart clings to but his dream. And even though we know that this may not be completely true, he chooses his desire over everything else. And I mentioned this before regarding the Cenobites from Hellraiser and the God Hand from Berserk. In the end, it is human desire that creates terror and horror. It's our perception and what we do with it. To be honest, this video just scratches the surface of everything we could talk about here. But what I'd really be interested in is your opinion on the character of Griffith. Have you ever encountered someone that resembles Griffith in real life? Let me know in the comments. So that's it for today, and I'll see you next time.